My name is Mara Ellison. I am 31 years old. And the night my brother grabbed my wheelchair and shoved me toward the exit of his own engagement party was the night I finally understood that being quiet is not the same as being invisible. He did it in front of 60 people. His hands came down on the push handles without warning, and the chair lurched forward 3 feet before I caught the wheels with both palms. "Quit performing," he said, loud enough for the nearest 2 tables to hear. His fiancée, Dana, pressed her fingers to her mouth. She was not covering a gasp. I held the armrests. I did not stand up and explain myself. I did not turn around to look at him. I pulled the chair back to the table I had been assigned, a small round near the service corridor, partially blocked by a linen cart, and I picked up my water glass. What none of them knew was that the woman sitting at the table by the window, the one in the gray dress who had arrived alone and signed in as a +1 for the venue coordinator, had spent 40 minutes with my spine films 18 months earlier. She had written 4 pages about what she found. She had not introduced herself to anyone at the party. She had not planned to say a word. My brother's name is Cole. He is 35, 4 years older than me, and for most of my life the version of events that circulated inside our family was simple. Cole was the one who delivered, and I was the one who complicated things. It was not a story anyone had sat down and decided to tell. It had assembled itself over 20 years the way those things do, through 100 small framings, a tone of voice at the dinner table, the way my mother's shoulders dropped when Cole walked into a room versus the way they stayed level when I did. He had been the athletic one, the one who made the regional track finals at 17, the one whose college acceptance letter my father had laminated and kept in the top drawer of his desk. I had been, in the family's private vocabulary, the complicated one. Not a villain. Just someone for whom things were always slightly more difficult than they should have been, which was understood, implicitly, to be a personal failing. The wheelchair had entered the story 3.5 years before the engagement party. It had started as lower back pain during a long work week. I was a junior project coordinator at a mid-sized civil engineering firm, which meant a lot of hours at a drafting table and a lot of site visits on uneven ground. I had ignored it for 6 weeks the way you do when you are 27 and cannot afford to be the person who takes sick days. By the time I saw a doctor, the nerve compression was already significant. By the time the MRI came back, there was a structural explanation for why my left leg had been going numb since August. 2 surgeries followed. The first addressed the primary compression. The second, 8 months later, addressed a complication from the first, scar tissue that had formed in a way the surgical team described as uncommon but not rare, which is the category of phrase that sounds reassuring until you are the person living inside it. After the second surgery, I used a cane for 4 months and a wheelchair for distances that involved standing for longer than 20 minutes. On a good day, in a familiar space, I could manage without either. On a day that involved a 3-hour event at a rented hall with no predictable seating arrangement and a garden terrace with uneven pavers, I brought the chair. Cole had watched all of this happen from a geographic and emotional distance. He lived 40 minutes away and worked in commercial real estate. He was good at it, the kind of person who could read a room and a contract simultaneously, and his primary response to my medical situation had been a version of polite skepticism that he never stated directly, but that I could read in the slight pause before he asked how I was doing, as though he was deciding in real time whether to believe the answer. He had visited me once after the second surgery, stayed for 45 minutes, and spent most of it talking to our mother in the kitchen. I do not think he was cruel by nature. I think he had grown up in a family where difficulty was treated as a choice, where the right attitude was understood to be the primary variable in any outcome, and that framework had calcified into something he applied automatically, without examination. When he saw me in the wheelchair, what he registered, I believe, was not a medical reality but a performance, a story I was telling myself and others in order to extract something. The generosity or attention or accommodation that he had never needed and therefore could not assign a legitimate value to. My parents had moved to something closer to acceptance over time, though acceptance in our family had its own specific texture, a careful neutrality that involved never asking direct questions and always providing logistical help without acknowledgement of why it was needed. My mother had installed a second handrail in her hallway bathroom after my first surgery. She had not mentioned it, I had found it on a Sunday visit and run my hand along it, and neither of us had said anything. That was, I understood, the closest available version of care. Cole's engagement to Dana had been announced the previous February. I had met Dana 4 times before the party. She was efficient and surface-warm in the way of someone who has learned that warmth is an effective social tool, and she had a talent for framing things in ways that seemed generous, while redistributing inconvenience outward. When Cole had mentioned, during one family dinner, that the engagement party venue had limited accessibility infrastructure, it was Dana who had smoothly added that I was so adaptable and that she was sure it would all work out. I had nodded and said nothing, which was the response the sentence was designed to produce. I had driven myself to the party. I had arrived 11 minutes after the listed start time to avoid the crowd at the entrance and found a space near the accessible ramp at the side of the building. The ramp connected to a side door that led out near the service corridor, which was why my assigned table was where it was. I had not been told this in advance. I found it when I arrived, and the venue coordinator, a composed woman in her 40s named Patricia, had guided me there with the careful efficiency of someone managing a situation she had not created. The party had been going for about 90 minutes when Cole crossed the room. I had been doing what I always did at family events in that period of my life. Staying at my table, responding when spoken to, watching the room with the particular attention of someone who has learned to read environments for their physical demands before anything else. I had eaten. I had talked briefly to 2 of Cole's friends from his university years and to my aunt on my father's side, who had asked about my work with the genuine curiosity she brought to everything. I had watched Dana work the room with the practiced ease of someone who had rehearsed this exact event in her imagination many times. Cole had been drinking since before I arrived. Not heavily, not visibly. He was not the kind of person who lost control in public, but in a continuous, even way that keeps a certain ambient level without peaks, and I had noticed it because I noticed those things. He had given a short, well-received toast at the 90-minute mark. Dana had touched his arm afterward and said something in his ear, and something in the exchange, the angle of her head, the half-second of his jaw, had registered to me as a correction rather than a compliment. He came across the room 8 minutes after the toast. He didn't approach me with the look of someone intending conflict. He approached with the look of someone managing a problem, which is a different expression and, I have come to understand, a more dangerous one. He stopped at the side of my chair, not in front of me, and he said, at a volume that carried, "You're blocking the server path." I looked at the space around me. The linen cart that had been beside my table had been moved. There was, technically, a narrowing of the corridor passage near my chair. I said I would move up a few feet and reached for the wheels. "I'll do it," he said. He didn't wait for a response. His hands came down on the push handles, and he moved the chair, not a few feet forward, but in a sweeping arc toward the main exit, a deliberate and sustained push that covered 12 feet before I locked the wheels. The room, I could feel without looking, had gone quiet in the particular way that means everyone has noticed, but no one has yet decided what to do. "Quit performing," Cole said, from behind me. "You've been doing this all night." Dana, from 3 tables away, a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite not one. I held the wheel locks. I did not turn around. My hands were flat on the push rims. The room stayed quiet for what felt like a long time. It was probably 4 seconds. Then a chair scraped. The woman in the gray dress was named Dr. Renata Voss. She was 53 years old. She was a rehabilitation physician at a regional medical center 40 minutes from where I lived, and she had been at the party because she and Patricia, the venue coordinator, had been college roommates, and she had come as a genuine +1, not as anyone's doctor and not with any intention of becoming part of the evening's events. She had been at the corner table since before I arrived. I had noticed her when I came in, a composed woman sitting alone with a glass of white wine, watching the room without performing engagement, which is the posture I recognize immediately because it is my own, but I had not known who she was. She stood up. She walked across the room in the direction of my table. She did not walk quickly or with the deliberate energy of someone who has decided to intervene. She walked the way she would walk to the bar, steadily, without announcement. She stopped beside my chair, and she looked at Cole. "I'm Renata Voss," she said. "I'm a rehabilitation physician. I treated this patient 18 months ago." She did not gesture toward me or address me. She kept her eyes on Cole. The spinal assessment I completed is on record. Would you like me to tell the room what it says? Cole's face did not change. This is what I remember most clearly, the stillness of it, the way he held the expression he had been wearing as though the new information had not yet found a way through. She's not your patient anymore, he said. No, Dr. Voss said. But the record is still accurate. She did not say anything else. She did not explain herself or ask for a response. She turned and walked back to her table and sat down and picked up her wine glass. The room had 47 people in it at that moment. Several had stepped out to the terrace, and every one of them had heard every word. Cole stood behind my chair for another 2 seconds. Then he walked toward the bar, without speaking. I reached into my bag. I had brought a paperback I sometimes carried as a prop for exactly this kind of situation, something to look at that is not another person's face, and I opened it to a page I had not been reading, and I looked at it until I could feel my hands steady. What I had not told anyone at the party, and what Cole did not know, was that 6 weeks earlier I had attended a meeting at the county planning office. The meeting was not about me, not directly. It was about a parcel of commercial property on the eastern edge of town, a former auto repair facility that had been sitting in a zoning gray zone for 11 years because the original owner had died without a clear succession plan, and the estate had been tied up in a dispute that involved 3 different parties and 2 different county filing systems. I had been tracking the parcel for 2 years, not as a personal project, as a professional one, initially. Part of my job at the engineering firm was to monitor zoning changes and permitted developments in a 60-mile radius, and this parcel had appeared on my radar because it sat adjacent to a drainage easement that affected 3 other properties our firm had been engaged on. I had read the original permit filings, the estate correspondence, and the 2 contested ownership claims so many times that I had come to know the document trail better than anyone currently involved. What I had found, 14 months into the process, was that one of the 3 disputing parties had submitted an affidavit in 2019 that contained a legal description error, a boundary coordinates mismatch that, under the county's current filing system, had the effect of invalidating their claim entirely if anyone ever formally pointed it out. No one had. The error had been sitting in the public record, unnoticed, for 4 years. I had spent 3 months confirming what I was reading with my firm's senior attorney, a precise and economical woman named Claudette Bernard, who did not encourage hypothetical conversations and who, when I laid out the document trail in a 45-minute meeting, had looked at the affidavit for a long moment and said, "This is a real finding." That was coming from Claudette, the equivalent of a standing ovation. The parcel, once the invalid claim was removed, resolved to 2 remaining claimants. One of them was a development LLC that had been dormant since 2021. The other was a private individual who had held a perfected lien on the property since 2017, a lien that predated all 3 of the disputed claims and that no one had thought to look for because it was filed under a previous version of the property's parcel ID number before the county had updated its indexing system. The private individual was me. Not originally. The lien had belonged to my grandfather, who had done electrical contracting work on the original facility in 2016 and had never been paid. He had filed the lien properly and then died before he could pursue it, and the paperwork had passed to my grandmother, and then, when she passed 2 years ago, to me as part of a small estate that had otherwise consisted of a china cabinet, a 2009 sedan, and $4,200 in a savings account. I had not known the lien existed when I started tracking the parcel professionally. I had found it when I was deep in the document trail for other reasons, and when I matched the parcel ID to my grandfather's name in the county records, it had taken me a full minute of sitting in front of my laptop to understand what I was looking at. The lien, after 4 years of statutory interest accrual and with the invalid claim now removed from the field, represented a secured interest in a property that the county assessor had valued at $2.3 million. Claudette had filed the formal challenge to the boundary affidavit at my instruction 6 weeks before the engagement party. The county had issued its preliminary ruling 3 days before I drove to that event hall. The folded architectural permit in my bag was not the lien document. That was in a file at Claudette's office, but it was a county-stamped copy of the preliminary ruling, which confirmed the boundary error and triggered the next phase of the process. I had brought it the way you carry a thing you are not sure you will need, just to have it with you. I had not planned to take it out that evening. Dana found me on the terrace 40 minutes after Dr. Voss sat back down. The party had continued. These things do. The music reasserts itself, the bar service resumes, and the 60 people who witness something uncomfortable begin, one by one, to perform the collective decision not to have seen it. A few people had come to my table in the intervening time. My aunt, briefly and with the particular quality of attention that she always brought. One of Cole's university friends who had touched the back of my chair and said, "That was not okay," in a low voice before walking away. Patricia, the venue coordinator, who had come to ask if I needed anything, and who had sat with me for a moment with the measured calm of someone who has managed every variety of human difficulty and no longer requires explanation. Dana came out through the glass terrace door and walked to the far railing, away from the two other guests who were out there, and she waited for me to come to her in a way that expected I would. I wheeled to the railing.
"He's going to apologize," she said.
"Later tonight, when people have gone. He knows he went too far." "All right," I said. "He's under a lot of pressure right now." She had her arms folded along the railing. She was looking at the parking lot. "The venue deposit was more than we planned, and there's a deal he's been working on for 8 months that has complications. He takes it out sideways sometimes. That's something we're working on." She said, "That's something we're working on," the way you say it when the working on it is largely theoretical. "I'm not asking you to excuse it," she continued. I think it would help if you understood the context." "I understand the context," I said. She turned to look at me. There was something in her expression that was recalibrating. She had come out with a specific version of this conversation mapped, and my answer was not fitting the expected shape. "Cole has always found you difficult to read," she said. "That's not a criticism. He doesn't know how to help you, and that makes him frustrated, and sometimes the frustration comes out wrong." I waited. "He loves you," she said. "He just doesn't know how to show it in a way that lands." "Dana," I said, "I didn't come out here to be explained to." She was quiet. "I'm going to go back inside in a few minutes," I said. "I'd like the rest of the night to be ordinary. That's all I want from this conversation." She looked at me for a moment. Then she nodded and went back through the glass door. I stayed on the terrace for another 8 minutes. The parking lot was orderly and well lit. A couple was leaving early, the woman carrying her heels in one hand. One of the catering staff was moving a rack of folded chairs along the side of the building. When I went back inside, Cole was at the bar. He looked at me once as I came through the door. I did not look away or toward him. I looked at the room and found my table and went back to it. Cole did not apologize that night. Whatever had been planned for later, when people had gone, did not happen. He and Dana left before the formal end of the event. One of their friends told me, without being asked, that Cole had not been feeling well. I stayed until 9:45, thanked Patricia, and drove home on the interstate with the radio off. 3 days later, a text arrived from my mother. It said, "Cole feels terrible. He's embarrassed. He liked to talk when things settle down." I read it and put the phone face down on the desk and went back to the county filing I had been reviewing. The text asked an implicit question that I had been asking myself for several years. What does talking accomplish? I had gone to enough family conversations in my life to know their structure. The apology that is also a renegotiation, the acknowledgement that is shaped to extract a corresponding acknowledgement, the resolution that restores the appearance of equilibrium without changing any of the underlying coordinates. I was not interested in that process. What I was interested in was the process Claudette Bernard was managing on my behalf, which moved on its own schedule and required very little from me except patience and accurate documentation. The county's preliminary ruling had been issued. The next step was a formal objection period of 30 days, during which the LLC, whose invalid claim had been challenged, could respond. Claudette had reviewed the LLC's corporate standing and found that it had been administratively dissolved in 2022 for failure to file its annual report. A dissolved LLC cannot respond to a legal filing in its own name. The 30-day period was, in Claudette's estimation, a formality. I went to work. I sat at the drafting table and I reviewed site plans and I attended 2 project meetings and I drove to a site inspection on a Tuesday morning where the ground was wet from overnight rain and I wore my waterproof boots and used my cane and looked at a drainage easement that had been cut 6 inches off spec and I wrote up the finding in precise language that my firm's senior engineer described as exactly what we needed. I came home and made dinner and read and went to sleep and did it again the next day. My back was at a 7 most of that week, which is the number I use internally for a level of discomfort that is present in every movement but does not prevent movement. I had learned over 3 years that 7 is manageable. The number I had started the week of the engagement party at was a 4, which is what a good week looks like. I did not tell anyone the number had changed. Cole called on the 14th day after the party. I let it go to voicemail. His message was 3 minutes long. It contained an apology in the first 30 seconds, which was genuine in its delivery if not entirely specific in its content. He said he had behaved badly and that he was sorry for how it had looked, and then it moved, in the remaining 2.5 minutes, into explanation. The deal that was giving him pressure. The way the venue situation had been more stressful than anticipated. A thing Dana had said that had lodged in him and that he was still working through. He ended with, I know you've been dealing with a lot. I should have been more present for that. I want to do better. I listened to the message twice. I noted the structure of it. The apology as a preamble to context, the context as the main event. I noted the phrase, how it had looked, which located the problem in appearance rather than action. I noted, I should have been more present, which reframed a history of absence as an aspiration rather than a record. I texted back, I heard you. Let's talk when things settle down. I used his own phrase deliberately. I am not certain he noticed. The 30-day objection period ended on a Wednesday. Claudette called me at 10 in the morning. The LLC did not respond, she said. The ruling stands. We move to the lien satisfaction phase next week. I was at my desk at the engineering firm. I had a site plan open on my monitor and a cup of coffee that had gone cold. What does that look like? I asked. The property goes to valuation, she said. Given the assessor's current figure and the statutory interest on the lien, your secured interest is approximately $2.3 million at present valuation. The other remaining claimant, the estate, is cooperating. They want a clean resolution. We're looking at a direct transfer agreement that satisfies your lien and conveys a partial interest in the property. I'll have the draft to you by Thursday. I looked at the site plan on my monitor. It was for a commercial drainage project in a town 40 miles east of where I was sitting. The spec error I had flagged 2 weeks earlier had been corrected. Thursday is good, I said. I finished the coffee. It was cold enough that it did not taste like much. My mother called that evening. She had heard from Cole, who had heard from their father, who had somehow, through a combination of public record access and a family friend who worked at the county assessor's office, learned that a lien in my grandfather's name had recently produced a legal finding. The chain of transmission had been imperfect, and what my mother had received was a version that was partially accurate and partially confused, but the core of it had arrived intact, that I was involved in a property matter that appeared to be significant. Is it true? My mother asked. About the property? There's a process underway, I said. It'll be clearer in a few weeks. Your father said the number he heard was. I don't want to get into numbers right now, I said. There's a lot of legal process still ahead, and it's not useful to talk about figures before things are final. She was quiet for a moment. Cole doesn't know? No one knows the specifics, I said. It's not something I've been publicizing. Another pause. Mara, she said, and in the way she said my name there was something I had not heard in a long time, a recalibration, a quality of attention that was not the careful neutrality she had practiced for years, but something more unsteady. How long have you been sitting with this? 2 years of research, I said. 6 weeks since the formal filing. She did not say anything for several seconds. I waited. Are you all right? She said. It was a different question than she usually asked. It did not have the shape of a social nicety. I'm fine, I said. I'll be in touch when there's something definitive to share. The transfer agreement came through on a Thursday, as Claudette had said it would. I reviewed it over 2 evenings with her notes in hand and signed it on a Friday afternoon in her office, A clean, uncluttered space with a window that looked out over a courtyard, and Claudette sitting across from me in the manner of someone who has closed 100 of these and finds satisfaction in the precision of the final documents without requiring ceremony. The agreement conveyed a 40% interest in the former auto repair facility to me in full satisfaction of the lien, including all accrued interest. Based on the current assessor's valuation of $2.3 million, my interest was valued at approximately $920,000. The agreement also included a development clause that, if the property was sold within 5 years, entitled my interest to a proportional share of the sale price. The county's rezoning of the property as commercial mixed use, which had been a parallel process moving through the planning office for 8 months, was finalized the same week. Claudette slid the documents across the table when I had signed, stacked them precisely, and said, "That was well-researched work." Coming from Claudette, that was a paragraph. I told my parents on a Sunday, at their house over dinner. I had chosen a Sunday because my brother does not usually come to Sunday dinners unless specifically invited. He and Dana have their own rhythm, and I wanted the first conversation to be with my parent alone. I brought the transfer agreement summary, a one-page document Claudette had prepared that laid out the key facts without legal density, and I set it on the table after dinner and walked my parents through it in the same order Claudette had walked me through it. The lien, the document trail, the invalid claim, the ruling, the transfer. My father read the summary twice. My mother read it once, and then sat very still with her hands in her lap. "This was Grandpa's lien," my father said. "Yes. You found it in the county records. 2 years ago." He looked at the document. His hands were flat on the table, on either side of the paper, in the posture of someone steadying themselves against a surface. "You've been carrying this for 2 years, and you didn't say anything." There was nothing definitive to say until there was. My mother looked at me. "You drove to that party," she said. "You sat at that table. You had this." She gestured at the paper without touching it. "Yes." "And you didn't," she stopped. "I wasn't there to make a point," I said. "I was there because Cole invited me, and I wanted to be present for something that mattered to my family." The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator made its usual sound. My father picked up his water glass, put it down without drinking. "Cole needs to know," my mother said. "I know. I'll tell him." "Mara." My father looked at me with the expression I had seen on his face very few times, the expression of a man who has held a specific version of his family in place for a long time and is feeling the structure of it shift. "I owe you an apology." "For what specifically?" He was quiet for a moment. "For a long time," he said. "For a general direction." It was more than I had expected. It was not everything, but it was a real thing, said plainly, and I received it as such. "Thank you," I said. I called Cole on a Tuesday evening, 10 days after the Sunday dinner. He answered on the second ring. I told him what I had told our parents, the lien, the process, the ruling, the transfer, in the same order, without editorializing. I could hear him listening in the specific silence of someone who is recalibrating in real time. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, "Grandpa's lien." "Yes." "You found it?" "Yes." Another pause. I didn't know it existed. Neither did I, initially. He was quiet for longer this time. I did not fill the silence. "At the party," he said. "You already had the preliminary ruling." "Yes." "You didn't say anything." "No." A short silence. "Why not?" "Because it wasn't what the night was for," I said. "The night was your engagement party. Whatever I was dealing with professionally was separate." I could hear him process this. The quality of his silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of someone waiting for the conversation to take a shape he recognized. It had become something more open and, I thought, more uncertain. "The doctor," he said. "At the party. Dr. Voss." "You knew her." "She'd treated me. I didn't know she'd be there." "But she just," he stopped. "She stood up." "Yes." "Without you asking." "Yes." He was quiet again. Then, "I'm sorry, Mara." "About the party." "About a lot of things before the party. I've been thinking about it since Mom and Dad told me about the property, and I've been thinking about it since before that, if I'm being honest. Since it happened. I've been thinking about who I am in our family, and what I've been telling myself about you, and I don't like the conclusion. It was the most honest thing my brother had said to me in years. It had the quality of something that had cost him to say, which meant it was real. I hear you, I said. Is that enough? He asked. It's a start, I said. A real one. The property sold 14 months later to a regional development group that converted it into a mixed-use commercial building. The development clause in my transfer agreement entitled my interest to a proportional share of the sale price, which resolved to $412,000, paid to me on a Thursday in April in the form of a wire transfer that cleared by 2 in the afternoon. I was at my drafting table when it cleared. I had a site plan open. I looked at the notification on my phone for a moment, set the phone down, and finished what I was working on. That evening I called Claudette to confirm receipt and to thank her. She said the case had been a clean piece of work and meant it as the highest available compliment. I told her I would be in touch for the next stage of whatever came next. She said she would be there. I am still at the engineering firm. I have a better office than I had 2 years ago. A corner one, with 2 windows and enough space for the standing desk my physical therapist had recommended, and I was promoted to senior project coordinator 7 months ago, which my supervisor announced at a team meeting in terms that I received with a particular combination of pleasure and composure that I have learned is the correct response to being recognized in a room. My back has good weeks and less good weeks. Last Tuesday was a 4. This week has been a 6. I use the wheelchair for distances, the cane for moderate situations, and nothing at all when the day allows it. I've stopped performing the appearance of being fine, which turns out to be its own form of relief. My parents and I talk on Sundays. My father has not made the same speech twice. My mother installed a proper accessible ramp at the side of their house last spring and mentioned it to me casually, which is as close to directness as she is likely to get and which I have decided to accept as the thing it is. Cole and Dana got married in September. I was there. I sat at the family table, not the one near the service corridor. Cole gave a toast that mentioned, briefly, that he was grateful for the people in his life who had shown him what patience actually looks like, and he looked at me when he said it, and I held his look and nodded once, and then looked away before it became a scene. It was enough.
I did not need more than that.
What I know about the version of myself that existed before that engagement party, the one who arrived 11 minutes late to avoid the crowd, who sat near the service corridor and opened a book she was not reading, who absorbed what happened and held the wheel locks and said nothing, is that she was not waiting for rescue. She was not performing patience in hopes that someone would notice and relieve her of it. She had work underway. She had Claudette and a document trail and a legal process moving on its own schedule, and she had the knowledge that the room a person stands in does not define the square footage of their actual life. The physician who stood up in that room did not save me. She confirmed, on the record, what was already true. Those are different things. The record had been accurate for 18 months before anyone said it aloud in a room of 60 people. It will remain accurate regardless of what any room decides to believe. I have thought sometimes about what Dr. Voss said and what she did not say. She named herself and her specialty and her professional relationship to the facts, and then she offered the room the choice to hear them. She did not demand. She did not perform outrage. She stood up because something untrue was being stated in front of her, and she had the specific standing to correct it, and she did that, and then she sat down and picked up her wine glass. I think about that posture a lot. The standing up, the sitting back down, the returning to your own table without waiting to see how the room decides to process what just happened. There is a version of this story where I produced the county document at the engagement party where I laid the preliminary ruling on the table and let 60 people draw the obvious conclusion. I did not do that. Not because I was too frightened, but because the point of that night was not me. The point was Cole's engagement. What I was carrying professionally was real and significant and had nothing to do with whether my brother respected me in that room, and conflating the two would have been its own kind of performance, the kind that says, I am worth something because of what I own, rather than, I am worth something. What I own is a separate fact. Those are different statements. The second one does not require a party to prove itself. What belongs to you whether or not the room knows it yet. What moment in this story stayed with you the longest? Was it when Dr. Voss stood up, when the county ruling came through, or the one sentence Cole said at the end that I wasn't expecting? If this story found you at the right time, subscribe. New stories post every week. Like if you stayed until the end. It helps more than you know.
Bell.